Hello everyone! Before we start, make sure to like and subscribe to the channel and leave a comment with where you're from and what time you're watching. That way, YouTube will keep showing you stories just like this one. Now, let's begin. I worked the night audit shift at a budget hotel off Interstate 40 in Amarillo, Texas. It wasn't a great job, but it paid decent for what it was, and I didn't mind the quiet hours between midnight and 8 in the morning. Most nights, nothing happened. I'd check in the occasional late arrival, process the day's transactions, and spend the rest of my shift watching Netflix on my phone behind the front desk. This was back in March of 2023, right after I'd dropped out of community college. I was 21, living in a studio apartment, trying to figure out what I wanted to do with my life. The hotel was one of those two-story places with exterior corridors, about 60 rooms total, sitting in a cluster of similar properties near the highway. You know the kind, clean enough, but nothing special, mostly truckers and families passing through. The weird stuff started on a Tuesday night, or technically Wednesday morning, around 2:15 a.m. I was restocking the coffee station in the lobby when I heard footsteps on the stairs outside. Heavy, deliberate footsteps coming down from the second floor. I glanced at the security monitor behind the desk. The camera covering the north stairwell showed nothing, just empty stairs under the yellow bug lights. But I could still hear the footsteps. They reached the bottom of the stairs and stopped. Then I heard them again, walking across the parking lot toward the lobby entrance. I stood up, expecting to see someone through the glass doors. But the parking lot was empty. My car, the only vehicle in sight, sat alone under the streetlight. The footsteps stopped right outside the door. I held my breath, staring at the entrance. The automatic doors didn't open. Nothing moved. After about 30 seconds, I heard the footsteps retreat, growing fainter until they disappeared. I checked all 4 security cameras, rewound the footage, scrubbed through it carefully. Nothing. No one had been outside. I tried to shake it off. Old building, sound traveling weird, maybe someone in one of the rooms with their TV too loud. I went back to my phone, but I couldn't focus. Every few minutes I'd glance up at the doors, expecting to see someone standing there. Around 3:30, the phone at the front desk rang. I picked it up, gave my standard greeting. "Front desk, this is Alex, how can I help you?" Silence, not dead air, but someone breathing. Slow, steady breaths. "Hello?" I said. "Is everything okay?" The breathing continued for maybe 5 more seconds. Then a woman's voice, barely above a whisper, said, "He's coming down the stairs." Before I could respond, she hung up. I checked the caller ID on the phone display. Room 217. I pulled up the registration system. Room 217 was listed as vacant, had been vacant for 3 days. I stood there staring at the screen, my heart starting to beat faster. Okay, so the system was wrong. Someone had checked in and the previous shift hadn't logged it properly. It happened sometimes when we were busy, but we hadn't been busy. The hotel was barely a quarter full. I should have called my manager or gone up to check on the room, but something stopped me. That woman's voice, the fear in it, the way she'd said he's coming, not I hear someone or I'm scared, like she was warning me. I looked at the security monitor for the second floor hallway. Room 217 was in the camera's field of view, about halfway down the corridor. The door was closed, no light visible underneath. As I watched, I saw something move at the far end of the hallway. A shadow, tall and thin, sliding along the wall. It moved smoothly, fluidly, in a way that didn't match any person walking. My mouth went dry. I kept staring at the monitor as the shadow moved closer to room 217. When it reached the door, it stopped. For a long moment, nothing happened. Then the door to 217 opened, just a crack, and the shadow slipped inside. The door closed. I grabbed my phone with shaking hands, pulled up the non-emergency police number. Before I could dial, the front desk phone rang again. Same room. 217. I let it ring 4 times before answering. Front desk. That same whisper. "Don't come up here. Don't let him see you." "Ma'am, I'm calling the police right now. Just stay. There's no police for this. Just don't look at the cameras. Don't watch." The line went dead. I looked at the monitor. The hallway was empty. No shadow, no movement. The door to 217 remained closed. Against every instinct, against everything the woman had said, I kept watching that camera feed. Minutes passed. 5, then 10. Nothing happened. I started to feel stupid. I'd probably imagined the shadow, misinterpreted what I'd seen. And the woman in 217, if there even was a woman, was probably just mentally unwell or playing a prank. At 4:17 a.m., the door to room 217 opened again. A man stepped out. He was tall, wearing dark clothes, and his face, I couldn't see his face properly because he was looking down, but his hands, I could see his hands. They were too pale, almost luminous in the dim hallway lighting, and his fingers were too long, joints bending in places fingers shouldn't bend. He walked down the hallway toward the stairs, his movements smooth but wrong, like footage played at slightly the wrong speed. He reached the stairwell and descended out of view. I switched cameras to the ground floor exterior view. He emerged from the stairwell and walked directly toward the lobby, toward me. I backed away from the desk, nearly tripping over my own feet. My hand found my keys in my pocket, the car keys, and I was making calculations in my head about whether I could reach my car before he reached the lobby entrance. The automatic doors slid open. He stood in the doorway, still looking down, those impossibly long fingers hanging at his sides. In the better lighting of the lobby, I could see that he wasn't wearing clothes, not exactly. It was more like shadow-shaped into the suggestion of clothing, shifting and moving like smoke. "Good evening," he said, and his voice sounded normal, friendly even. "I'd like to check in." My voice came out as a croak. We're fully booked." "That's strange." He tilted his head, still not looking up at me. "Your sign says vacancy." He was right. The neon sign outside, I'd forgotten to turn it off after the last check-in hours ago. My hands were trembling so badly I could barely control them. I meant, the system is down. I can't check anyone in right now. I don't need the system." He took a step closer to the desk. "I just need a room." "I can't help you. I'm sorry." Finally, slowly, he lifted his head. Where his face should have been was just smooth, blank skin. No eyes, no nose, no mouth, even though I'd heard him speak. Just smooth, pale skin stretched over the shape of a skull. I ran. Didn't think. Didn't grab my phone or my keys or anything. Just bolted for the back office, slammed the door behind me, and locked it. My whole body was shaking as I fumbled for my phone in my pocket, but I'd left it on the desk. I could hear him on the other side of the door, not walking, not moving, just breathing. That same slow, steady breathing I'd heard on the phone. Then his voice, muffled by the door. "She tried to warn you. Now you've seen me." I pressed myself against the far wall, as far from the door as I could get in the tiny office. I don't know how long I stayed there. It felt like hours. At some point I heard the front doors open and close, footsteps receding. Then silence. When the morning shift manager arrived at 6 a.m., she found me in the office, still pressed against the wall. I tried to explain what happened, but the words came out confused and panicked. She checked the security footage. The cameras showed me working normally all night. No one entering the lobby, no one in the hallways. The last recorded activity was a guest checking in at 11:45 p.m. I quit that morning. Didn't even finish the shift. Just left my uniform in the office and walked out. 2 weeks later, I heard from a friend who still worked there that they'd found something in room 217. The room hadn't been occupied. The cleaning staff confirmed they'd locked it after cleaning 3 days before my shift. But when they went in to investigate after my report, they found a message written on the bathroom mirror in what looked like condensation. 2 words. He saw. I never went back to that hotel. I don't work night shifts anymore. Don't work in hotels anymore. I got a job at a coffee shop, morning hours, lots of people around, lots of light. But sometimes, late at night when I'm home alone, I hear footsteps outside my apartment door. Heavy, deliberate footsteps. They stop right outside, and I hold my breath, waiting for the knock that never comes. My daily commute into Seattle was killing me, both financially and mentally. I was spending over 3 hours a day in traffic, and burning through gas money I didn't have. So when a coworker suggested I join a carpool through this rideshare app for commuters, it seemed like the perfect solution. This was in January of last year. I was 28, working as a graphic designer for a marketing firm downtown. The app matched me with 3 other people who lived in my area and worked similar hours. There was Diana, a nurse in her 40s, Mark, an accountant around my age, and somebody listed only as Jay. No profile picture, no additional information. The app said Jay had 5-star ratings from previous carpool partners, so I didn't think much about it. We arranged to rotate drivers each week. Diana volunteered to drive the first week so I could see how it worked. Monday morning, I stood at the designated pickup spot on the corner of 23rd and Madison at 6:45 a.m. Diana pulled up in a silver Honda CR-V. Mark was already in the back seat. I climbed in the front passenger side. "Where's Jay?" I asked as I buckled my seatbelt. Diana glanced at the back seat in a rearview mirror. "What do you mean? He's right there." I turned around. Mark was sitting on the passenger side behind Diana. The seat behind me was empty. "There's nobody there," I said. Mark looked at me with this confused expression, then looked at the empty seat next to him. "Are you feeling okay? Jay's been here since my pickup." Diana laughed nervously. "Okay, weird joke, but we need to get going or we'll hit the worst of the traffic." I didn't push it. Maybe they were messing with me, some kind of initiation prank for the new carpool member. I'd play along. We drove into Seattle, made small talk about weekend plans and office drama. The whole time, Mark would occasionally make comments directed at the empty seat. "What do you think, Jay?" Or Jay was saying earlier that, and he'd referenced some conversation I apparently hadn't heard. Diana responded to these comments naturally, agreeing or disagreeing with whatever Jay had supposedly said. I kept waiting for them to break character and laugh, but they never did. When we got to the office, Mark opened his door and waited, like he was letting someone exit first. He said, "See you tonight, Jay," to the empty space, then got out. I pulled Diana aside in the parking garage. "Okay, what's the joke? Is Jay an imaginary person or what?" She looked at me with genuine concern. "There's no joke. Jay was in the car with us." "Are you sure you're feeling all right?" Either they were committed to this prank on a level I couldn't understand, or something was very wrong. I went to my desk and pulled up the carpool app on my phone. I looked at Jay's profile. 5 stars, member since 2019, over 200 completed rides. But still no photo, no bio, just that single letter initial. I sent a message through the app. "Hey Jay, I don't think we've properly met. Want to grab coffee before the ride home?" The response came immediately. "We've met. You just don't remember yet." That evening we gathered at the same spot for the ride home. I was determined to get to the bottom of this. When Diana's car pulled up, I looked carefully in the back seat before getting in. Mark was there, and the seat next to him appeared empty, but there was a depression in the seat, like weight pressing down on it. I got in, not saying anything. As Diana pulled into traffic, I kept glancing back. Mark was looking out his window, seemingly unaware of anything unusual. But that depression in the seat remained, and I swear I could see the seatbelt buckled across the empty air. "How was everyone's day?" Diana asked, and Mark started talking about some spreadsheet crisis. Then Diana said, "What about you, Jay? How was the hospital?" And that's when I heard it. A voice speaking from that empty seat. It wasn't coming through the car speakers or from anyone's phone. It was just there, in the space where someone should have been, but wasn't. The voice was neutral, neither clearly male nor female, and it said, the usual. 3 surgeries, all successful. My skin went cold. Diana and Mark continued the conversation as if this was completely normal. I sat frozen, listening to this invisible person discuss their day in detail. Specific names, specific procedures, specific times, details too elaborate and consistent to be a prank. When we reached my stop, I practically fell out of the car. As I closed the door, I heard that voice say, "See you tomorrow, David." My name is David. I'd never introduced myself to Jay. That night, I couldn't sleep. I researched the carpool app looking for complaints or weird stories. Nothing. I searched for Jay's profile through every angle I could think of, but found no additional information. At 2 a.m., my phone buzzed with a message through the app. It was from Jay. I know you're confused. Most people are at first. You'll understand soon. I typed back, understand what? What are you? I'm your carpool partner. I've always been your carpool partner. You just forgot for a while. I blocked Jay on the app and sent a message to Diana and Mark saying I was dropping out of the carpool. Diana responded immediately, is this because of Jay? Please don't go. We need 4 people to make this work. Mark's message was more direct. Jay says you're making a mistake. He says you need us more than you know. I didn't respond. The next morning, I drove myself to work. The traffic was terrible, just as bad as I remembered, but I didn't care. I was alone in my car, no invisible presences, no voices from empty seats. But as I sat in gridlock on I-5, I glanced in my rearview mirror. The back seat was empty, except it wasn't. Not quite. There was that depression again, that weight pressing into the upholstery. And in the reflection of my mirror, for just a split second, I saw something. Not a person exactly, more like the outline of a person, a shimmer in the air where a person should be. A voice came from behind me, that same neutral tone. You can't drive away from me, David. I'm already with you. I swerved, nearly hitting the car next to me, and when I looked in the mirror again, the back seat was empty. Completely empty. No depression, no shimmer, nothing. I sold my car 2 weeks later and started taking the bus. It takes longer, costs almost as much, and I have to leave earlier, but at least I'm surrounded by other people. Real people I can see. But sometimes, on crowded mornings when every seat is taken, I'll feel someone brush past me in the aisle, and I'll smell something I can't quite place. Not cologne or perfume. More like the absence of smell, like a space where air should be but isn't. And once, on a particularly packed bus, I heard that voice whisper right next to my ear. This is less efficient. Come back to the carpool. I still get notifications from the app, even though I deleted it from my phone. Messages from Jay, asking when I'm coming back, telling me that Diana and Mark miss me, reminding me that we're a team. Last week I got a new notification. We found a replacement. He's working out great. He can see me just fine. I don't know what Jay is or why I could see through whatever illusion makes him visible to others. Part of me is grateful I escaped whatever that was. But another part of me, the part that lies awake at night wondering, can't stop thinking about that last message. If they found someone who can see Jay just fine, does that mean that person is like Diana and Mark? Or did something change in them, slowly, over time, until they could see what wasn't there? And if I'd stayed in that carpool, would I eventually have started seeing Jay too? Before we get into the next story, if you come for the first time, please make sure to subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon for upcoming scary stories. We need your support. Please share these stories with your friends and family. Thanks. I started taking violin lessons at Mitchell Music Academy in downtown Minneapolis when I was 25. I know that's old to start learning an instrument, but I'd always wanted to play, and I finally had a job that paid enough to afford lessons. The academy was in an old building that used to be a bank, built sometime in the 1920s. They'd converted the vault into a soundproof practice room, which I thought was cool when my instructor, Mrs. Chen, first showed me around. The main studio had 6 practice rooms, but the vault room, practice room 7, was the largest and the only one that was completely soundproof. Mrs. Chen mentioned that advanced students got priority for room 7, but if it was available, anyone could use it. She also mentioned, almost as an afterthought, that some students didn't like practicing there. When I asked why, she just shrugged and said some people got claustrophobic. For my first 2 months, I practiced in the smaller rooms, which were fine. You could hear faint echoes of other students practicing, scales and melodies bleeding through the walls, but it was never distracting. I was making decent progress, working through beginner exercises and enjoying myself. Then one evening in late April, I arrived for my usual 7 p.m. slot and found all the regular practice rooms occupied. Mrs. Chen was leaving for the night and told me room 7 was open if I wanted it. She gave me the key, a heavy old brass thing that looked like it belonged in a museum, and reminded me to lock up when I was done since I'd be the last person in the building. Room 7 was at the end of a hallway that extended past the main studio. The door was huge, at least 6 inches of solid steel, with that big wheel handle you see in movies about bank heists. I unlocked it and pulled the door open. It moved smoothly despite its obvious weight, well-maintained hinges. Inside, the room was about 12 feet square, with concrete walls and floor. Someone had hung acoustic panels to make it less echoey, and there was a music stand, a chair, and a small table in the corner. No windows, of course, since it was an old vault. The only light came from a couple of LED fixtures installed in the ceiling. I settled in, set up my music, and started working through my scales. The sound quality was incredible, every note clear and pure, without any of the ambient noise from the other practice rooms. I could see why advanced students wanted this space. After about 20 minutes, I heard something. A knock, 3 quick taps, like someone rapping their knuckles on wood. I stopped playing and looked at the door. Nobody there. The door was heavy steel, not wood, and it was closed. I figured someone was in the hallway and went back to practicing. The knock came again. Same pattern. 3 quick taps. This time I was sure it was coming from inside the room, but that didn't make sense. I was alone. The walls were solid concrete. There was nowhere for anyone to hide. "Hello?" I called out. My voice sounded flat in the soundproofed space, like the room swallowed it immediately. No response. I waited, violin in hand, feeling increasingly stupid for talking to an empty room. After a minute of silence, I started playing again. I got through maybe 2 bars before I heard it again. Not a knock this time, but a sound like someone dragging something heavy across the floor. A long, slow scraping sound that came from the corner behind me. I spun around. Nothing. The table in the corner sat exactly where it had been. Nothing had moved. My hands were shaking now, and I nearly dropped my bow. This was stupid. I was alone in a concrete box, getting spooked by acoustics I didn't understand. Old buildings made weird sounds. The room's soundproofing probably distorted normal building noises in unexpected ways. I forced myself to keep practicing, but I couldn't focus. Every few minutes, I'd hear something. Footsteps, breathing. Once, something that sounded like a whisper, too faint to make out words. At 8:15, I decided I'd practiced enough. I packed up my violin and reached for the door handle. That's when I noticed something on the wall next to the door. Scratches, faint but visible, carved into the concrete. Words. They don't leave. I stepped closer, my heart hammering. The letters were crude, like someone had clawed them into the stone. How had I not noticed them when I came in? They were right next to the door, impossible to miss. I grabbed the door handle and pulled. The door didn't move. I pulled harder, using both hands, but it wouldn't budge. The wheel handle that should have rotated to release the lock mechanism wouldn't turn. Panic started creeping in. I was locked inside a soundproof vault. Even if I screamed, nobody would hear me. I pulled out my phone. No signal, of course. Concrete walls. I tried the door again, throwing my full weight into it, but it was like trying to move a mountain. That's when the lights went out. Complete darkness. The kind of darkness you only get in rooms with no windows, no light sources, nothing. I couldn't see my hand in front of my face. I fumbled for my phone, turned on the flashlight, and the beam seemed pathetically weak in the consuming dark. I heard breathing again. Close this time, right next to me. I swung the light around and saw nothing but empty space and concrete walls. The breathing continued, steady and rhythmic, coming from everywhere and nowhere. "Who's there?" my voice cracked. "This isn't funny." The breathing stopped. In the silence that followed, I heard something else. Music. A violin playing somewhere in the room. Not a recording, not an echo, but the live sound of someone drawing a bow across strings. The piece was beautiful and sad, a melody I didn't recognize. My violin was in its case at my feet. The music wasn't coming from it. It filled the room, surrounding me, and I realized with growing horror that it was coming from the walls themselves, vibrating through the concrete. The melody grew louder and more frantic, the tempo increasing until it was almost violent. Then it stopped abruptly, and a voice spoke in the darkness right next to my ear. "Play with me," I screamed. I don't remember what happened next clearly. I threw myself at the door, pounding on it with my fists, kicking it, screaming for help. At some point, the lights came back on and the door swung open easily when I tried the handle. I ran, left my violin, left everything, just ran down the hallway and out of the building. I stood on the street shaking and crying until I could breathe normally again. The next day, I called Mrs. Chen and told her I needed to switch teachers somewhere else, not at Mitchell Music Academy. She was quiet for a moment, then asked if I'd practiced in room 7. When I said yes, she sighed. "What happened to you happened to others," she said. "The door locks sometimes, the lights fail. Some students hear things. We've had engineers look at everything. They say it's all up to code. Nothing's wrong. But students keep having experiences." "Why do you still let people use that room?" I asked. "Because most people have no problem, and the ones who do, they're always fine once they get out. It's never hurt anyone." "Never physically," I said. She didn't respond to that. I found a new instructor across town. I've been taking lessons there for 8 months now, and I'm making good progress. But I can't practice alone anymore. I always need someone else in the room, or at least in the building, because sometimes when I'm playing, I hear it. That other violin, joining in with my melody, playing harmonies I didn't write. And sometimes I hear that voice, "Play with me." I keep playing. I don't know what else to do. I think it's following me now, whatever it is. But as long as I keep playing, as long as I don't stop, it just listens. I'm terrified of what will happen if I quit. I'm a real estate agent in Boulder, Colorado. I've been doing this for about 7 years, and I've seen all kinds of properties: beautiful mountain homes, downtown condos, suburban family houses. Most of the time, selling a house is straightforward. You list it, stage it, hold some open houses, and eventually, someone makes an offer. But last fall, I got a listing that broke every pattern I knew. The property was in North Boulder, a 1960s ranch-style house with 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, and a partially finished basement. The seller was a woman named Patricia Hendricks, mid-50s, who'd inherited the house from her mother. She'd never lived in it herself, had just paid the property taxes for the 3 years since her mother passed, and now wanted to sell it. When I met her to sign the listing agreement, she was professional but clearly uncomfortable. We were sitting in a coffee shop, not the house. I asked if I could schedule a time to walk through and take photos. She hesitated, then said, "I'll give you the key, but I can't go with you. I have bad memories of that place." I didn't push. Plenty of people have emotional attachments to properties. She gave me the key and the address, and I drove over that afternoon with my camera and measuring tape. The house looked fine from the outside. Well-maintained lawn, mature trees, a long driveway leading to a 1-car garage. I let myself in through the front door and immediately noticed the temperature. It was October. Cool outside, but not cold. Inside the house, the air was freezing. I could see my breath. I checked the thermostat in the hallway. It was set to 68 degrees, and according to the display, the heat was running. But the house felt like a refrigerator. I made a note to have an HVAC company check the system before we listed. The interior was dated but clean. Floral wallpaper, old carpet, furniture covered in sheets. I walked through the main level, taking photos, noting the dimensions of each room. Everything seemed normal until I reached the master bedroom. The bedroom itself was fine, but the closet door was open, and I could see that someone had written on the back of it. Not vandalism exactly, more like notes. Dates going back years, written in different colored markers. Next to each date was a single word, stayed. March 17th, 2019, stayed. June 2nd, 2019, stayed. October 8th, 2019, stayed. The list went on. Dozens of dates, all with that same word. The most recent entry was September 14th, 2022, just a few weeks before I'd gotten the listing. I took a photo of the dates, made a note to ask Patricia about it, and continued my walkthrough. The basement stairs were in the kitchen, a narrow staircase descending into darkness. I flipped the light switch at the top, but nothing happened. Great, a burned-out bulb. I used my phone flashlight and headed down. The basement was partially finished, like Patricia had mentioned. One section had drywall and carpet set up as a rec room with an old TV and some boxes. The other section was unfinished, just concrete and exposed beams. My phone light illuminated the space in a narrow beam, creating long shadows. That's when I saw the mattress. Just a bare mattress sitting on the concrete floor in the unfinished section with a pillow and a blanket folded at one end, like someone had been sleeping there. I walked closer, and that's when I smelled it. Not mold or mildew, but something organic and wrong, like meat that had started to turn. I covered my nose and mouth with my sleeve, looking for the source. On the wall above the mattress, someone had written something in what looked like black marker. Big letters, almost 3 feet tall. Property of the house. I took a photo, my hand shaking. This was way beyond normal. Had Patricia's mother been mentally ill? Was someone squatting in the house? I needed to get out and call Patricia immediately. I turned to head back upstairs and heard a sound from the unfinished section further back past the mattress, a rustling like fabric moving or someone shifting their weight. "Hello?" My voice came out weak. "This is private property. You need to leave." The rustling stopped. Silence for 3 long seconds. Then a voice, thin and reedy, came from the darkness. "I live here." Every instinct screamed at me to run, but I forced myself to stay calm. "No, you don't. This house is being sold. You're trespassing. I'm calling the police." "I've always lived here." The voice was closer now, though I hadn't heard footsteps. "She knows I'm here. Everyone who lives here knows I'm here." I backed toward the stairs, keeping my phone light pointed at the darkness. "Who are you?" "I'm the house." That's when I saw it. Movement in the shadows, something pale sliding across the concrete floor. Not walking, not crawling, but moving in a way that made my brain refuse to process what I was seeing. Too many limbs, or not enough, bending in wrong places. I ran, bolted up those stairs, through the kitchen, out the front door, and into my car. I was shaking so hard I could barely get the key in the ignition. As I pulled out of the driveway, I looked back at the house. In the basement window, just barely visible, was a face pressed against the glass. Too pale, features too stretched, staring at me with empty eyes. I called Patricia from my car. She answered on the first ring, like she'd been waiting. Before I could say anything, she said, "You saw it." "What the hell was that?" I was almost shouting. "Is someone living in your mother's basement?" "No, nothing lives there. It's just there. It's always been there. My mother called it the tenant. She said it came with the house, that every owner had dealt with it." "Patricia, we need to call the police or an exterminator or..." "They've been called multiple times over the years. They never find anything." "I'm sorry I didn't warn you, but nobody ever believes me unless they see it themselves. You can't sell this house. You can't let someone move in there with that thing." She was quiet for a long moment. "That's why I'm selling it. It needs a new owner. That's how it works. When the house changes hands, it resets, goes dormant for a while, gives the new owner time to settle in before they realize." "That's insane. You're talking about passing this nightmare on to someone else." "My mother did it to me. Her mother did it to her. The house has been sold 17 times since it was built. Everyone knows what they're doing, even if they don't admit it." She paused. "Will you still list it?" I should have said no. Should have dropped the listing, reported her, something. But I needed the commission, and she was right about one thing. Who would believe me? I listed the house. We priced it low, way under market value, and it sold in 2 weeks to a young couple from California. I told myself they'd figure it out eventually, that this wasn't my responsibility. But I still have those photos on my phone, the dates on the closet door, the writing on the basement wall, that face in the window. And last week, I got an email from Patricia. No message, just a photo attachment. I opened it and felt my stomach drop. It was the closet door again, but with a new date added at the bottom of the list. November 3rd, 2023, stayed. The date I'd gone to the house for the walkthrough. The word wasn't written in marker this time. It was carved into the wood. I keep checking my apartment looking for signs that something followed me home. So far, nothing. but I can't shake the feeling that I'm being watched, and sometimes, late at night, I hear rustling in my closet. I never open it after dark anymore. I used to take my lunch breaks at Riverside Park in Richmond, Virginia. It was a nice little park, about 5 blocks from the office where I worked as a paralegal. Nothing fancy, just some trees, a playground, a paved path along the river, and a few benches. I'd sit, eat my sandwich, scroll through my phone, and enjoy 30 minutes away from the fluorescent lights and legal documents. My regular bench was under this big oak tree, positioned so I could watch the river. I'd been sitting there almost every workday for 2 years. I knew the regulars, the other people who took their lunch breaks at the park. There was the older man who fed the pigeons, the woman who power walked the path in business clothes, the teenagers who skipped school to smoke near the far restrooms. This started in August of last year. I sat down at my usual bench around noon, unwrapped my turkey sandwich, and noticed someone had carved something into the wooden slats of the bench seat. Fresh carving, the wood was still pale where it had been gouged. 3 words: "Don't sit here." I looked around, wondering if this was some kind of territorial thing. Maybe someone else had claimed this bench and was leaving weird messages to scare people off. Nobody was nearby except the pigeon guy, and he was absorbed in feeding his birds. I sat down anyway. It was my bench. I'd been coming here for 2 years. I wasn't going to let some vandal run me off. I was about halfway through my sandwich when I felt it. A cold spot, right next to me on the bench. Not like a breeze, more like someone had opened a freezer door. The cold was localized to my right side, approximately where another person would sit if the bench was shared. I shifted away slightly, uncomfortable. The cold spot moved with me, or rather, I moved closer to it, like the bench had gotten shorter. I stood up quickly, looking at the bench. It was empty. Normal wooden slats, normal size, nobody there. But the cold spot remained, a visible distortion in the air, like heat shimmer, but cold. I could see through it, but something was there, taking up space. My phone buzzed, a text from my coworker. "Where are you? Judge wants the brief in 10 minutes. I grabbed my stuff and walked quickly back to the office, looking over my shoulder at the bench. The cold spot was still there, and I swear I saw the bench compress slightly, like weight pressing down on it. Over the next week, I avoided that bench. I took my lunch at my desk or walked to a different park, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. I started researching the park's history, looking for any accidents, deaths, anything that might explain what I'd experienced. I found something. 15 years ago, a woman named Claire Novak had been found dead on one of the park benches. She was 32, worked at a bank downtown, and died of a brain aneurysm while eating lunch. The news article didn't specify which bench, but I had a feeling I knew. On Friday afternoon, I walked to the park after work. I needed to know. The bench was empty, the late-day sun making the carved warning clearly visible. I sat down, right in my usual spot, and waited. At first, nothing. Just normal park sounds, birds, distant traffic, children playing. Then, slowly, the temperature dropped. The cold spot manifested next to me, that same distortion in the air. And this time, I stayed. "Claire," I said quietly, feeling ridiculous talking to empty air. "Is that you?" The cold intensified. The distortion seemed to solidify slightly, and I could make out the vague shape of a person. A woman, sitting next to me, turned slightly toward me, though I couldn't see any features. My phone slipped from my hand, fell to the ground. When I bent to pick it up, I saw something that made my blood freeze. There was a shadow on the ground cast by the bench and by me. But there was a third shadow, sitting between us, a clear silhouette of a person who wasn't there. I straightened up slowly. The cold spot was still next to me, and now I could hear something, breathing, ragged, labored breathing, like someone struggling for air. It grew louder, more desperate, and with it came a smell, sharp and metallic, like copper pennies. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "I'm sorry for what happened to you." The breathing stopped. The cold spot flickered, and for just a second, I saw her. Actually saw her, solid and real, a woman in a gray business suit with short dark hair, her face twisted in pain and fear. Her eyes met mine, and her mouth moved, forming words I couldn't hear. Then she was gone. The cold dissipated, the air returned to normal temperature, and I was alone on the bench. I didn't go back to that park for a month. When I finally did, I brought flowers and left them on the bench. The carved warning was still there, but someone had added something underneath it. Claire sits here. I sat down, carefully leaving space beside me. The cold spot appeared after a moment, gentler this time, almost peaceful. I ate my lunch, and for the first time in a month, I felt like things might be okay. I still take my lunch breaks at that bench. Claire is always there, a constant cold presence at my side. I've gotten used to it. Sometimes I talk to her about my day, about office drama, about nothing in particular. I don't know if she hears me, but the cold spot never leaves. Other people avoid the bench now. They walk past, look at it, and choose somewhere else to sit. I see them shiver as they pass, feel the cold emanating from it. Sometimes I want to warn them, tell them Claire is harmless, but I never do. Because sometimes, on bad days, the cold gets intense. The breathing comes back, that desperate gasping, and I see shadows out of the corner of my eye, more than just Claire's. Other shapes, other presences, gathering around the bench. I think Claire isn't alone anymore. I think she's been collecting others, people who died in the park or near it, drawing them to her bench. And I think by sitting there every day, by acknowledging her presence, I've become a beacon. Last week, the warning carved into the bench changed. Someone or something had altered it. It now reads, "Don't sit here alone, I still go." But I always make sure I leave before dark. Before we continue, if you're enjoying these stories, please hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. We have more scary stories coming your way. Thanks for your support. I started babysitting for the Morrison family when I was 19. They lived in a nice neighborhood in Austin, Texas, one of those newer developments with identical houses and perfect lawns. They had 2 kids, Emma, who was 5, and Noah, who was 3. Sweet kids, easy to manage, and the pay was good. Mr. and Mrs. Morrison both worked demanding jobs and needed someone reliable for weekend date nights. The first few times I babysat went perfectly. The kids would play, I'd make them dinner, we'd watch a movie, and they'd go to bed without complaint. The house was comfortable, modern, with an open floor plan and lots of light. It wasn't until my 4th time babysitting that I noticed the door. The kids were asleep and I was on the couch scrolling through my phone around 9 p.m. The Morrisons had said they'd be home by 11. The house was quiet, just the low hum of the refrigerator and the distant sound of cars on the main road. Then I heard it. A door closing upstairs, not slamming, just the soft click of a latch catching. I muted my phone and listened. The kids' bedrooms were upstairs, along with the master bedroom and a bathroom. I'd put Emma and Noah to bed an hour ago. Had one of them gotten up? I climbed the stairs slowly, checking Emma's room first. She was asleep, curled around a stuffed elephant. Noah's room was next, and he was also sleeping peacefully, his nightlight casting a soft glow. The hallway had 4 doors: Emma's room, Noah's room, the bathroom, and the master bedroom. All 4 doors were exactly where I'd left them, either open or closed in their usual positions. But at the end of the hallway, past the master bedroom, there was something I hadn't noticed before. Another door. Smaller, narrower, painted the same white as the walls, so it almost blended in. I'd walked past it multiple times without seeing it. I approached the door slowly. There was no handle, just a small keyhole. I tried pushing it, but it was locked. I pressed my ear against it, listening. Nothing. When the Morrisons came home that night, I casually asked about the door. Mrs. Morrison's smile faltered for just a second. "Oh, that's just a storage closet," she said quickly. "It's locked because we keep some of my husband's work equipment in there. Nothing interesting." But the way she said it, the way she glanced at her husband, told me there was more to it. The next time I babysat, I was determined to figure out what was behind that door. After putting the kids to bed, I searched the house for a key. I checked the kitchen drawers, the desk in the living room, the entry table. Nothing fit the keyhole. I was about to give up when I found it, taped to the underside of the master bedroom's nightstand drawer. An old brass key with a faded paper tag attached, The tag had a single word written in smudged ink: keep locked. I stood in the master bedroom holding that key, debating with myself. This was wrong. I was violating their privacy, betraying their trust. But I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something I needed to know, something important. I walked to the door at the end of the hallway. The key slid in smoothly, and the lock turned with a soft click. I pushed the door open. It wasn't a storage closet. It was a child's bedroom. Smaller than Emma and Noah's rooms, but clearly designed for a child. There was a twin bed with a blue comforter, a toy chest, shelves with picture books, a small desk. The walls were painted pale yellow with white clouds stenciled near the ceiling. But everything was covered in dust. Thick, undisturbed dust that meant nobody had been in this room for a long time. The bed was made perfectly, the toys were arranged neatly, but there was this sense of abandonment, of a space frozen in time. On the desk, there was a framed photo. I walked over and picked it up, wiping the dust from the glass. The photo showed the Morrison family, but younger. Mrs. Morrison's hair was shorter. Mr. Morrison had less gray at his temples. Emma looked about 2 years old in the photo, and they were holding another child, a boy, maybe 4 years old, with dark curly hair and a bright smile. I heard a sound behind me and spun around. Mrs. Morrison stood in the doorway, her face pale. "You weren't supposed to open this," she said quietly. "I'm sorry, I was curious." I set the photo down carefully. "Who is this? The boy in the picture?" Her eyes filled with tears. "That's Liam, our son. I didn't know you had another child." "We don't, not anymore." She stepped into the room, looking around with an expression of such sadness it made my chest hurt. "He died 4 years ago. Leukemia. He was only 6. I'm so sorry. I shouldn't have. We kept his room. We couldn't bear to change it. But we locked it because Emma and Noah don't remember him. They were too young. We didn't want to confuse them with questions we're not ready to answer." I nodded, understanding, feeling terrible for intruding. But there was something she wasn't saying. I could see it in the way she looked at the room, the fear mixed with her grief. "There's something else," she said finally. "We locked it because sometimes things move in here. We'll come home and find toys in different positions, books open to different pages. We tell ourselves it's just air currents, or we're misremembering how things were arranged, but you don't believe that," I finished. She shook her head. "I think he's still here. I think Liam is still in this house, in this room, and I don't know if that's comforting or terrifying." We stood in silence for a moment. Then, from downstairs, we heard giggling. Child's laughter, bright and happy. We both froze. "Emma and Noah are asleep," I whispered. Mrs. Morrison's face went white. We rushed downstairs together. The living room was empty. The kids' room's upstairs. We'd just been up there, both children still sleeping, but we'd both heard it, clear as day. Mrs. Morrison clutched my arm. That was Liam's laugh. I'd know it anywhere. We checked the whole house, every room, every closet, every space a child could hide. Nothing. Nobody. The house was silent again. I didn't babysit for the Morrisons after that night. I told them it was because of my class schedule, which was partially true. But the real reason was that room, that locked door, and the feeling that something in that house was watching. A few months later, I heard through a mutual friend that the Morrisons had moved, sold the house quickly, at a loss, and relocated to a different neighborhood. They didn't take Liam's furniture with them. They left the whole room intact, locked the door, and walked away. I drive past that house sometimes. There's a new family living there now. I've seen kids playing in the yard. I always slow down as I pass, looking at the upstairs windows. And once, just once, I saw a small face looking out from what I knew was that back bedroom. A boy with dark curly hair pressing his palm against the glass. I didn't slow down again after that. I moved to Asheville, North Carolina about 2 years ago for work. I'm a software developer, and my company let me relocate from our main office in California to work remotely. Asheville seemed perfect. Smaller city, lower cost of living, and tons of outdoor activities. I'm big into hiking, so the proximity to the Blue Ridge Mountains was a huge selling point. I spent my first few months exploring all the popular trails: Craggy Gardens, Mount Mitchell, Looking Glass Rock. Tourist stuff mostly, well-maintained trails with plenty of other hikers around. But by that summer, I was ready for something more challenging, something less crowded. I found a trail recommendation on an obscure hiking forum. Someone had posted about a trail called Ember Ridge, supposedly a moderate 5-mile loop with incredible views. The directions were specific: a trailhead off a Forest Service road about 40 minutes from downtown. The poster mentioned that the trail wasn't on official maps because it was technically on private land, but the owner allowed hikers as long as they were respectful. That should have been my first warning sign. But I was stupid and overconfident. I drove out on a Saturday morning in late July. The Forest Service road was exactly where the directions said, a narrow dirt track that wound up into the mountains. I followed it for about 3 miles until I reached a small gravel pull-off with space for maybe 2 cars. No signs, no trail markers, just a barely visible path heading into the woods. I loaded my backpack, made sure my phone was charged, and started hiking. The trail was overgrown in places, clearly not maintained by any official organization, but it was passable, and the forest was beautiful. Dense canopy overhead, birdsong, the smell of pine and earth. After about a mile, I reached a fork in the trail. Neither path was marked. I pulled up the GPS on my phone to check my position, but the app couldn't get a clear signal. The topo map showed my general location, but not the trails themselves. I chose the right fork, figuring I could always backtrack if it seemed wrong. The trail climbed steadily, my legs burning as I pushed up the incline. The vegetation got thicker, branches reaching across the path, brushing against my arms and face. That's when I noticed the silence. The birds had stopped singing. The wind had died. The only sound was my own breathing and footsteps. In all my years of hiking, I'd never experienced that level of complete quiet in a forest. It felt wrong, oppressive. I kept walking, telling myself I was just noticing things that were always there. But the wrongness grew stronger with every step. The trees looked darker, their bark almost black. The shadows between them seemed too deep, too solid. After another half-mile, I found the shrine. It was just off the trail, a small clearing maybe 20 feet across. In the center was a pile of stones arranged in a rough pyramid shape, about 4 feet tall. Around the pyramid, someone had placed objects: flowers, long dead and brown, pieces of clothing, photos, candles melted into stumps, and written on the stones in what looked like white paint, symbols I didn't recognize. My skin prickled. This was clearly some kind of memorial or ritual site. I should leave, respect the space, and continue on my way. But curiosity made me step closer. The photos were old, faded, showing different people at different times. Some looked decades old, black and white, while others were more recent color prints. All the photos showed people smiling, hiking, enjoying the outdoors. And they all had something in common. They were all taken on this trail. I recognized the distinctive shape of the ridgeline in the backgrounds. I pulled out my phone to take a photo of the shrine, and that's when I saw the message written on the largest stone at the base. They never left. A chill ran down my spine. I backed away from the shrine, suddenly desperate to be anywhere else. I turned back to the trail and started walking quickly, not quite running, but close. The trail should have taken me back the way I'd come, descending down the slope. Instead, it climbed higher. I stopped, confused. I must have taken a wrong turn, gotten disoriented near the shrine. I pulled out my phone again, but now I had no signal at all. The GPS showed my location as a blank area. Not even the background map would load. I could either keep going forward, hoping the trail looped around, or backtrack to the shrine and try to find where I'd gone wrong. Neither option was appealing. I chose forward. The trail narrowed, becoming barely distinguishable from the surrounding forest. I had to push through undergrowth, branches whipping back at me, thorns catching on my clothes. My water bottle slipped from my pack's side pocket, bouncing down a slope into thick brush. I didn't go after it. After what felt like hours, but was probably only 30 minutes, I heard water. A stream, somewhere ahead. I followed the sound and emerged onto the bank of a creek, maybe 10 feet wide, running fast over smooth stones. On the opposite bank, I saw someone. A man standing at the edge of the water, staring at me. He wore hiking clothes that looked old-fashioned, colors faded, and he was completely motionless, just staring. "Hey," I called out, "do you know the way back to the trailhead?" He didn't respond, didn't move. His expression was blank, emotionless. "Are you okay?" I tried again, still nothing. I was about to wade across to check on him when I noticed his feet. He wasn't standing on the bank. He was standing in the water, but the water wasn't flowing around his legs. It was flowing through them, like he was transparent. I stumbled backward, nearly falling. When I looked again, he was gone. Just empty forest on the other side of the creek. I ran, followed the creek downstream, reasoning it had to lead somewhere, had to eventually reach a road or a house or something. My lungs burned, my legs ached, branches tore at my face and arms. The forest seemed to press in on me, the shadows reaching out like hands. The creek led me to another clearing, and my heart sank when I saw what was there. The shrine. The same pile of stones, the same photos and objects. I'd somehow made a circle, but something had changed. There were new items around the shrine. My water bottle, the one I'd dropped miles back, and next to it, my car keys, even though I knew they were still in my pocket. I felt for them, panicking, and yes, they were there, solid and real. But identical keys sat on the ground in front of the shrine. A sound behind me made me spin around. The man from the creek stood at the edge of the clearing. Behind him I saw others, a woman in jogging clothes, a young guy with a backpack, a teenage girl. All of them staring at me with those same blank expressions, all of them translucent, the forest visible through their bodies. They began moving toward me, slowly, in unison. I ran in the only direction that was open, away from the trail, crashing through underbrush. I didn't know where I was going, didn't care, just needed to get away from those things. I don't know how long I ran. Eventually, I burst out of the woods onto a paved road, an actual, real road with yellow lines and everything. I'd never been so happy to see asphalt in my life. I flagged down the first car that came by, a pickup truck with an elderly man driving. He looked at me with concern, taking in my scratched up arms and wild expression. "You okay, son? You look like you've seen a ghost." "I got lost on a hiking trail," I managed. "Can you give me a ride back to town?" He let me in, and as we drove, I tried to explain where I'd been. When I mentioned Ember Ridge, his face darkened. "Ain't no trail up there," he said. "That land's been closed for 30 years, ever since the disappearances." "What disappearances?" "Hikers, 6 or 7 of them over the years, went into those woods and never came out. Search parties found nothing. Eventually, they closed the whole area, but people still go up there. Mostly they come out fine, but some don't. I got my car the next day, drove back to that Forest Service road with a friend following me in his truck. My car was exactly where I'd left it, untouched. But on the windshield, tucked under the wiper blade, was a photo, an old Polaroid, faded and yellowed. It showed me, standing in front of the shrine, smiling. But I'd never taken a selfie there, and in the background, barely visible, were those figures, the translucent people, watching me. I moved back to California 3 months later. I don't hike anymore. I'm a podcast producer, been doing it for about 4 years. Mostly true crime and paranormal stuff, working with different hosts and shows. It's not glamorous. I spend most of my time editing audio, removing background noise, fixing levels, making sure everything sounds professional. But I love it. There's something satisfying about taking raw recordings and turning them into polished episodes. Last spring, I was hired to produce a show called Forgotten Frequencies. The concept was that the host, a guy named Marcus Bell, would collect old audio recordings from estate sales, thrift stores, and online auctions. Reel-to-reel tapes, cassettes, vinyl records, whatever. The idea was to explore these forgotten recordings and tell the stories behind them. It was an interesting gig, and Marcus was easy to work with. He'd send me the raw audio files, along with whatever context he could find about their origins. I'd clean them up, add narration, and produced the episodes. Episode 8 was different. Marcus sent me the files in early April with a note. This one's weird. Found it in a storage unit auction in Philadelphia. Reel-to-reel tape labeled Session 4, Patient B, Dr. H. Vance, March 1978. Appears to be a therapy session or something similar. Let me know what you think. I loaded the audio into my editing software and started listening. The recording was surprisingly clear for something almost 50 years old. I could hear the hiss of the tape, but the voices came through distinctly. A man's voice, measured and professional. This is Session 4 with Patient B, March 17, 1978. Please state your name and age for the record. A woman's voice, younger, shaky. Jennifer Holt, I'm 24. And can you tell me why you're here today, Jennifer? Because of the dreams, they won't stop. Every night, the same thing. Describe the dreams for me. What followed was about 40 minutes of Jennifer describing recurring nightmares about a house she'd never been to, a Victorian-style home with a red door and a willow tree in the front yard. In her dreams, she'd walk through the house seeing things that disturbed her. A child's room with scratches on the walls, a basement with a stain on the concrete floor, a locked attic with something behind the door, something that knocked and whispered her name. Dr. Vance asked careful questions, probing for connections to Jennifer's past, trying to understand the psychological root of the nightmares. It was fascinating from a historical perspective, a window into late 70s psychiatric methods. But then, at the 41-minute mark, something changed. Jennifer's voice altered, became deeper, slower. He's here. Who's here, Jennifer? He's been here the whole time, listening, watching. Jennifer, are you referring to someone in the room with us? Not in the room, in the tape. He lives in the recording now. There was a long pause, then Dr. Vance's voice, uncertain. I don't understand what you mean. You will. Everyone who listens will. He's waiting. The recording ended abruptly after that, mid-sentence, like someone had shut off the machine. I sat back in my chair, unsettled. It was probably just a mentally ill patient having a psychotic episode during therapy. But something about the certainty in Jennifer's changed voice bothered me. I sent Marcus my first cut of the episode. He loved it, said it was perfect for the show, creepy and mysterious. We scheduled it to release the following week. That night, I was at home editing a different project when I heard my computer speakers make a sound. Not from the audio file I was working on, but from somewhere else, another program or background process. It was a voice, faint and distorted. He's here. I checked my running applications, nothing that should be producing audio. I closed everything except my editing software, and the voice stopped. I wrote it off as a glitch, maybe a browser tab I'd forgotten about. But it happened again the next night. Same voice, same phrase, but clearer. He's here. He's listening. On the third night, I was in bed trying to sleep when I heard it coming from my phone on the nightstand. He's here. He's watching. I grabbed the phone, checked every app. Nothing was running that could produce sound. But as I stared at the screen, a photo appeared in my gallery that I hadn't taken. A dark, blurry image that looked like someone had photographed a blank wall, but with a face visible in the grain, pale and indistinct. I deleted the photo immediately and turned off my phone. The episode released on schedule. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Within hours, dozens of listeners were commenting that they'd experienced strange things after listening. Voices in their recordings, images appearing on their devices, the feeling of being watched. Marcus wanted to do a follow-up episode about the listener reactions, but I refused. Something was wrong. This wasn't just people getting spooked by creepy content. Something had been in that original recording, and we'd amplified it, distributed it to thousands of people. I tried to trace the origins of the tape. The storage unit it came from had belonged to a Dr. Harold Vance, who died in 1984. His practice had closed, and his records were lost or destroyed. I found an obituary mentioning that he'd specialized in treating patients with unusual psychological conditions, but no details. I couldn't find any information about Jennifer Holt. No records, no missing person reports, nothing. It was like she'd never existed. The episodes were pulled from all platforms after a week. Too many complaints, Too many listeners reporting disturbing experiences. Marcus canceled the show entirely. But I still have the original recording. I've tried to delete it multiple times, but it keeps reappearing in my files, no matter how many times I empty the trash, reformat the drive, even replace the hard drive entirely. The file comes back. And sometimes, late at night, I hear Jennifer's changed voice whispering from my speakers. He's here. He's in the machine. And now he knows where you are. I don't do audio work anymore. I switched careers, took a job doing data entry at an insurance company. Nothing creative, nothing that involves recording equipment. But yesterday, a coworker asked me to help fix his laptop, said the speakers were making strange sounds. When I opened his audio files folder to check for issues, I saw it. A file I recognized immediately. Session for Foyer Patient B 1978.wav. I closed the laptop without saying anything and left the building. I think it's spreading, and I think I'm the one who let it out. Before we continue with more stories, if you've been enjoying this compilation, please share it with friends who love scary stories. Don't forget to subscribe and hit that bell icon. Thanks for watching. I bought my first house in Spokane, Washington last year. It was a small bungalow in an older neighborhood, needed some work, but it was mine. I was 30 years old, finally achieving that milestone of home ownership. The place had good bones, a decent backyard, and the price was right. My next-door neighbor, Mrs. Kozlov, introduced herself the day I moved in. She was probably in her 70s, originally from somewhere in Eastern Europe based on her accent. She brought over a plate of cookies and welcomed me to the neighborhood with a warm smile. "You have good garden," she said, gesturing to my overgrown backyard. "You should plant things. Make it beautiful like mine." I looked over the fence at her yard. It was immaculate, rows of flowers and vegetables in perfect symmetry. Not a weed in sight. Everything was lush and healthy, thriving in a way that seemed almost unnatural for late October in Washington. "I don't really have a green thumb," I admitted, "but your garden looks amazing." "I teach you," she said, patting my arm. "You come over Sunday. I show you my secrets." That Sunday, I went to her house. The garden was even more impressive up close. The plants were huge, tomatoes the size of softballs, flowers with blooms bigger than my hand. The colors were so vibrant they almost hurt to look at. "How do you get everything to grow so well?" I asked. Mrs. Kozlov smiled, a strange smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Good soil. Very important. Good soil. And you must feed plants properly, give them what they need." She showed me around, explaining her gardening techniques, most of which sounded normal enough. Crop rotation, proper watering schedules, companion planting. But then she led me to a section in the back corner, partially hidden by a trellis covered in climbing vines. "This is my special garden," she said, "for special plants." The plants in this section were unlike anything I'd seen before. They had twisted stems, leaves that seemed to move even when there was no wind, and flowers with colors that didn't quite look natural. Deep purples that shifted to black, reds that pulsed like they were alive. "What kind of plants are these?" I asked. "Old country plants. From my grandmother's garden, from her grandmother's garden. Very old, very special." She reached out and touched one of the flowers, stroking its petals like you'd pet a cat. "They need different food than normal plants." "Different how?" She didn't answer directly. Instead, she pulled out a small bottle from her apron pocket and unscrewed the cap. Inside was a dark liquid, almost black, with a smell that made my stomach turn, metallic and rotten at the same time. "Special fertilizer," she said, pouring a few drops at the base of one of the strange plants. The plant seemed to shiver, its leaves perking up immediately. "You want some for your garden?" I politely declined, suddenly wanting to leave. There was something about those plants, something wrong that I couldn't articulate. I thanked her for the tour and went back to my house. Over the next few weeks, I noticed things. Mrs. Kozlov's garden kept growing, even as winter approached and everything else in the neighborhood withered. Her plants stayed green and lush through frost and freezing temperatures. And at night, I'd sometimes see her in the garden, tending to those special plants in the back corner, using that dark liquid fertilizer. But what really bothered me were were the sounds. Late at night, I'd hear what sounded like whispers coming from her yard. Not voices exactly, more like wind through leaves, but forming sounds that were almost words. I'd stand at my bedroom window, looking out, and see those strange plants moving, swaying in rhythm even when the air was still. In November, a guy from my neighborhood went missing. Mark Chen lived 3 houses down, worked as a contractor. His wife reported him missing when he didn't come home from a job. The police investigated, but found nothing. He'd just vanished. 2 weeks later, another person disappeared. A teenager named Emma Rodriguez walked to the corner store one evening and never made it home. The neighborhood was on edge, everyone looking at each other with suspicion. I noticed Mrs. Kozlov's special garden section had expanded. More of those weird plants, growing larger and healthier than ever. And the smell from her yard had gotten stronger, that metallic rot I'd noticed before. But worse. One night, I couldn't sleep. It was around 2 a.m., and I heard those whispers again. I got up and looked out my window. Mrs. Kozlov was in her garden, even though it was freezing and pitch dark except for a small lantern she carried. She was digging in the special section, a deep hole, and next to her was a large burlap sack. As I watched, she dragged the sack to the hole and pushed it in. It was heavy, the way she struggled with it, the shape of it as it fell into the hole, the size and shape of a person. My blood went cold. I grabbed my phone, debating whether to call the police. But what would I say? I saw my elderly neighbor bury something in her garden at 2 a.m. It could be anything, compost, old fertilizer, a dead pet, but I knew. Deep in my gut, I knew what was in that sack. The next morning, I went over to her house. I knocked, waited, no answer. I walked around to the backyard. The gate was unlocked. The garden looked normal in the daylight, beautiful and thriving. I walked to the special section. The ground was freshly turned in one spot, dark soil mounded up, and growing from that mound, impossibly fast, was a new plant. It had already sprouted, already had leaves, growing in hours what should take weeks. The plant was unlike the others. This one had flowers shaped like human hands, reaching upward, fingers spread, and in the center of each flower was something that looked like an eye, dark and wet and looking at me. I ran, went straight home and called the police, told them everything. They came out, searched Mrs. Kozlov's property. They found her in the house, sitting in her kitchen, smiling that strange smile. "Just garden," she kept saying. "Just plants. Nothing wrong with growing beautiful things." They dug up the special section. I don't know all the details of what they found. The police kept it quiet. But Mrs. Kozlov was arrested, and 6 people who'd gone missing over the past 2 years were accounted for. The garden was destroyed, everything pulled up and burned. But they missed something. A single seed blown by the wind into my yard. I found it when I was raking leaves, a seed unlike any I'd seen. Dark purple, almost black, pulsing with warmth when I picked it up. I should have destroyed it, should have burned it or thrown it in the garbage, but something made me plant it, bury it in the far corner of my yard, water it, watch over it. It's growing now, fast, impossibly fast. The leaves are already 6 inches long, reaching toward the sun. And sometimes, late at night, I hear it whisper. Not words I can understand, but sounds that make me think of Mrs. Kozlov's smile, of those hand-shaped flowers, of the dark liquid in her bottle. I know what it needs to thrive. I know what feeds it best. And sometimes, when I walk through my neighborhood, I find myself looking at my neighbors differently, wondering, calculating, thinking about how my garden could be just as beautiful as Mrs. Kozlov's. I haven't done anything yet, but the plant keeps growing, and its whispers keep getting louder, and I'm not sure how much longer I can resist. I drive for a rideshare company in Pittsburgh. It's flexible work, pays decent, and I get to meet interesting people. Well, usually interesting. Most nights are routine, picking up college kids from Southside, taking business people to the airport, the occasional drunk group needing a safe ride home from the bars. This happened 2 weeks ago, on a Friday night in late December. I'd been driving for about 6 hours. Was thinking about calling it quits for the night when I got a pickup request from a residential address in Squirrel Hill. The ride was going to Mount Washington, about a 15-minute trip depending on traffic. I pulled up to the address, a nice house with Christmas lights, and my passenger got in the back seat. He was probably in his 40s, wearing a nice coat and carrying a briefcase. Professional looking, seemed normal. "Evening," I said. "Mount Washington?" "Yes," he replied, looking at his phone. 122 Grandview Avenue. I pulled away from the curb and headed toward the Liberty Tunnel. It's one of the main routes from Squirrel Hill to Mount Washington, a long tunnel through the mountain that connects the two neighborhoods. I'd driven through it hundreds of times. We were about halfway through when my passenger spoke again. "Can you slow down?" I glanced in the rearview mirror. He was looking out the window, staring at the tunnel wall. "Everything okay?" I asked. "Just slow down. I want to see something." I eased off the gas, uncomfortable. The tunnel had a minimum speed limit, and I didn't want to create a hazard, but he was the customer, and he seemed calm enough. "There," he said, pointing at the tunnel wall. "Do you see it?" I looked. Just dirty white tile, water stains, the usual grime you see in old tunnels. "See what?" "The door." I looked again more carefully, and he was right, there was something. About 20 feet ahead in the tunnel wall was a shape that looked like a door, rectangular, about 6 feet tall, with what might have been a handle, but it was obviously just discoloration in the tile, or a maintenance panel, or something structural. "That's not a door," I said. "It's just—" "Stop the car." His voice had changed, not loud, but commanding. Something in his tone made me nervous. "Sir, I can't stop in the middle of the tunnel. It's dangerous. Stop the car right now." Traffic was light, nobody behind us, nobody coming in the other lane. Against my better judgment, I pulled over to the shoulder and stopped. My finger hovered over the app's emergency button. The passenger opened his door and got out. Just stepped out into the tunnel, walked over to that shape in the wall. I watched through my window, debating whether to drive off and leave him there. He reached out and touched the wall where the door shape was, and the wall opened. I'm not kidding. The tile pulled back, swinging inward like an actual door, revealing darkness beyond. My passenger stood there for a moment, looking into that darkness, then turned back to look at me. "You can see it," he said. "That's rare." "What the hell's that?" My voice came out higher than normal. "A passage. One of many throughout the city. Most people can't see them. The doors are hidden unless you know how to look. But you saw it, which means you have potential." "Potential for what?" He smiled, and it wasn't a friendly smile. "To go places normal people can't go. To see things normal people don't see. Pittsburgh has layers, history built on history, tunnels under tunnels. The official city is just the surface." I was fumbling for my phone, ready to call 911, convinced I was dealing with a crazy person. But then I saw something move in the darkness beyond that door. Something pale and thin, sliding across the floor like a snake, but with too many segments, too many joints. The passenger saw my expression. "Don't worry about them. They're harmless if you know the rules. If you don't," he shrugged. "Most people who go through these doors don't come back. But those of us who can see, we're different. We can navigate the underneath." "I want you to get back in the car," I said, trying to sound calm. "We can forget about this ride. No charge. Just get back in and I'll take you wherever you want to go. I'm not going anywhere on the surface tonight. I have business below." He started to step through the doorway, then paused. "You should come. You have the site, which means you're already marked. Might as well learn what that means." "I'm not going anywhere with you." "Your choice. But the doors won't stay hidden from you now that you've seen one. You'll start noticing them everywhere. In buildings, in bridges, in the walls of your own home. And sooner or later, you'll want to know what's on the other side." He stepped through the doorway, and the door swung shut behind him, becoming just a discoloration in the tile again, like it had never been open. I sat there for maybe 30 seconds, my heart pounding, trying to process what I'd just seen. A car came up behind me, honking, and I jerked back into motion, driving through the tunnel and out into the night. I completed the ride. Marked it as passenger no-showed in the app, even though I'd definitely picked him up. I didn't know what else to do. Since that night, I've seen 3 more doors. One in the basement of my apartment building, barely visible behind the water heater. One in the wall of the parking garage I use. One in the back of a convenience store I stopped at for coffee. Each time I see one, I feel this pull, this urge to open it and see what's beyond. And each time, I see something moving in the darkness behind it, those pale, thin things waiting. Last night I woke up and found a door in my bedroom wall, right next to my closet, clear as day. A door that definitely wasn't there when I went to sleep. The handle was within reach from my bed. I haven't opened it, but it's still there. I can see it right now as I type this, illuminated by my laptop screen. And I can hear something on the other side, breathing, scratching, waiting. The passenger was right. I'm marked, and I don't know if I can resist forever. Because part of me, a part that's growing stronger each day, wants to know. Wants to see what Pittsburgh looks like underneath. Wants to walk those passages and meet whatever lives there. I'm still driving for the rideshare company. But now I take routes that avoid tunnels, avoid old buildings, avoid anywhere a door might appear. It's getting harder. The doors are everywhere once you start looking. And last night, I got another pickup request, same address in Squirrel Hill. When I arrived, my passenger from the Liberty Tunnel was waiting, standing under a streetlight, smiling. I didn't cancel the ride. I unlocked the doors. He got in, and this time, he gave me a different destination. Not an address, just instructions. Drive until you see the next door, then stop. I'm driving now. It's been 20 minutes and I still haven't seen a door, but I know I will. They're everywhere now, hidden in plain sight, waiting for people like me who made the mistake of looking too closely. And when I see the next door, I think I'm going to stop. I think I'm going to open it. I think I'm going to see what's underneath. Thank you for listening to this compilation of true horror stories. If you enjoyed these stories, please subscribe to our channel for more scary content. We post new horror story compilations every week. Leave a comment telling us which story was your favorite and share this video with anyone who loves scary stories. Remember, the best horror stories are the ones that could be real. Sleep tight, everyone.